Sean, what do you think about the special education mess?
Well, like you said, this issue of a teacher shortage, if you want to see the drastic effect of this, what's been done to our special ed departments, campus, on campuses all over, is really the canary in the coal mine here.
Yes.
And if there's a teacher shortage in general, there is certainly a large number of vacancies in special ed departments. You just open up some of the teacher job websites, and you'll see just an inordinate amount of SPED positions open at any given time. And they don't pay them anymore, although I know, because I know a lot of SPED teachers and I love them. And I will tell you, they do a lot more work than some. And and they're not necessarily paid for it.
No.
And I know some SPED teachers that stay at school till 8 o'clock at night, especially during testing time. And they're just outgunned, understaffed. And so their solution, much like the solution to the issue of with our English learners, is to simply eliminate specialized programs and mainstream them. And that's what they did to our English learners.
Boo!
And that's what they're trying to do to SPED students. And they are erroneously claiming that by having separate programs like special day class, or in my case, sheltered English instruction, was denying students of their civil rights according to their interpretation of the law. And the reality is, it's really just dollars and cents. Why would they pay somebody to teach 15 to 20 kids when they could just double up the size and say, all right, you're a teacher of English learners now, you're a SPED teacher now, we're all SPED teachers, we're all English learner certified. So that's their solution. And to be honest, it's just about money. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we have this coded phrase. I say coded because I know what it really means, and the way it's used is in special education. We have this phrase, least restrictive environment, right? Teachers, we know this. And if you're a parent with a student with an IEP, an individualized education plan, which Sean and I are both. We had a student who just graduated with an IEP, and we're gen ed teachers. Least restrictive environment is just coded language for the least expensive option. We see you, K12. You're the emperor with no clothes. We see it. So we unpack the special education mess extensively. Again, I'm not a special education teacher, and neither is Sean, but our guest host, Manny, is. She has over 2 decades of SPED experience, so she'll be coming on to unpack that mess for us, to do some justice for our special education teachers who deserve more pay because they have more expert knowledge, and our special education students who are really getting the raw end of the deal. Okay, moving on. Climate and culture. If you are not a teacher, you're thinking, wait, what? The weather outside? No. K12 is so jargony. Climate and culture is code for really what we say is how your campus feels over time and the extent to which everybody is sort of aligned behind a common mission. But really, the real deal is when we talk about climate and culture, we mention climate and culture problems. So that's coded language for how crazy and unsafe your campus is. And climate and culture issues really stem from the soft bigotry of low expectations. I didn't coin this phrase. Dr. Kareem Weaver did. I talk about him extensively in the Reading Mess episodes. I love this guy. But it's really like internalized racism, internalized ageism, not believing that children or certain children are not capable of behavior conducive to learning. And people, just adults, making excuses for children and not holding them to high expectations and high standards. And really just campuses that feel just nuts. So we talk about this and unpack it extensively on the podcast, but I want to get your reaction. When I say climate and culture, what do you think, Sean?
Well, I've worked at lots of different schools, and some of them are very large, and I can tell you, this is just the conclusion that I've come to, that smaller is better. If we want to do better, if we want to do better by kids and families, we find a way to make things as small as possible. Because in a school with thousands of kids, with 6 people in charge, it's hard to get some consistency. And so what happens is, we have these policies laid out, but this stuff is very nuanced. And so rather than take a nuanced approach and really try to shift the culture, a lot of times admins are just putting out fires all day, every day. And they're not given an opportunity to really plan to shift the culture of a school that has become toxic in some ways. And it's not just my school, it's every school.
Yeah.
Kids have changed since that pandemic. And I will admit that, but that's also been used as sort of an excuse in the past few years to excuse poor behavior, to excuse wild behavior. We haven't pivoted with the kids to help show them the light. And so on any given day, you have attendance problems are rampant, right? And that's a behavioral thing. A lot of kids don't see the merit of coming to class on time, some not coming to class at all, walking around campus, causing a ruckus, and you add, bad actors on things like TikTok, and you have instances of kids vandalizing schools in a major way with no remorse, writing horrible graffiti on the wall, doing things that we haven't pivoted to prevent. What we need is consistency. Yes. We need clear policies that are consistently enforced. We need to stop making excuses and deal with issues when they pop up in a way that shows kids that this is how you be a citizen in the world. Because right now they're learning that, some of these kids learn that school is for hanging out. School is for fun. School is for other things
selling drugs
than school.
Or selling drugs, or even trafficking of females on your campus. It's bad. Things that are going on in K12 campuses are egregiously bad, dangerous, illegal. And the leadership of K12 school districts wants desperately for you to not notice this because, real estate values are tethered to the reputation of your local school district. And, they do things like doctor their what we call climate and culture data, where they don't properly document all of the problems that are going on a campus. Our schools feel like a hair trigger dangerous. Like anything could happen at any moment, and we're all just surviving each day. And what I know is that kids can be better. If you expect better and you provide the real help that they need to be better, it is not rocket science. We can do this, but we just need to radically re-envision how schools are led.
Well, and get teachers involved in the decision-making process.
Amen.
Because I have no doubt that every teacher I know has their class on lockdown, their little kingdom. They've got their policies, they build relationships, but when you go outside of your classroom, that's when you really start to see the larger problems at play on campuses all over America. These kids have been raised on technology. They have been indoctrinated into a online culture that is toxic, misogynistic, racist, violent, taking pleasure and joy in the pain and suffering of others. We're trying to teach these kids to be human beings, and we need to stop looking at it just as an individual teacher issue, like you need to manage your class, and really look at our campuses as a whole and come up with a plan to help that. Because there's no reason why, if you go out on campus and see kids interacting with the campus, that you get a different experience. And it happens to me all the time. I've had, none of my students would do some of the things that I see out on the yard. And it's because they know that once they leave my classroom, there's no consequences, at least not consistent ones, or ones that really show them that what they did was questionable or wrong.
Thank you. Well, we talk a lot about this and we unpack this in the theme and we dig into this mess. There's so many things to talk about: the school-wide behavioral intervention plans, restorative justice, for or against. There's so much to do here. We talk about PBIS, so many things. So you can look forward to a rich, nuanced conversation about this once we get to that theme. Next, this topic kind of flows out of the climate and culture mess is the DEI mess. Diversity, equity, and inclusion mess. This is a biggie. Of course, everyone is talking about DEI right now. And the official stance of this podcast, staying very bipartisan, is that yes, we are for any initiative which takes a student or any person in the K12 world, notices that they are arriving at work, they're arriving at school with some kind of a lesser opportunity to thrive, noticing what that is and mitigating that. That's really what DEI work is. And really all children are an historically marginalized identity. They fit with all of the others. And so there's really two sides of this debate. Like one, you're in a district or a situation where DEI is like not mentioned and it's become like a bad word. And so anything quote unquote woke is off the table. I just saw something on Instagram yesterday, honey, where an Oklahoma teacher was talking about a woke oath that they had to take to not have anything woke in their pedagogy for fear of, I don't know, being fired. So that's one side of the continuum. On the other side, and this is kind of where Sean and I are, there is DEI work. Social justice is a huge part of certain districts in the K-12 context, but it's highly exclusionary. And so they're only privileging certain identities, others not, right? It's all coded language for really race-based equity work, which I say over and over again is fine so long as you're calling it that and not saying this is all DEI work, but it's really only African-American social justice work. And I say we need that, and that needs to be the only focus at times. But what actually gets done for African-American students winds up being really superficial and doesn't actually shift any of student outcomes or make things feel any better for our African-American students. It's all very cherry-picked, assessment-based data. That is all, I call it baloney on all of it.
You can say bullshit. You're in a safe space. I mean, I think, politics and education are heavily tied to each other, and it's always been that way. But historically speaking, teachers have been trusted as experts. Teachers have been trusted with the youth of today. Parents and families trust us with their kids to do the right thing. And it's only recently, maybe in the past, 10 years, that things like equity have not only become buzzwords, but have also been co-opted by opposite sides of a political spectrum for reasons that have nothing to do with kids. I've heard that teachers are indoctrinating kids. Mm-hmm. I've heard all sorts of accusations that we are the problem, and we're in strange times because never before has education and teachers been so vilified. It feels like we are in some dystopian, anti-intellectualistic future society. The scary part is it's right now. And so I think we need to flip the script on the whole conversation and really use Socratic questioning when faced with criticism for diversity, equity, inclusion practices. Like in where I've worked before, it's never been an issue, but I know in some states you can lose your teaching license for even mentioning certain words like equity and inclusion. So we're lucky enough to live kind of in a bubble where we're pretty free from this, but we read the news every day and we thank our lucky stars that we work in a place where, at least for now, we are not under the microscope at all times. But there are little bits of it creeping in here and there. That new law that passed that parents can opt out of any curriculum that they see fit. We're going to have to wait and see how that plays out because it really opens the doorway for all sorts of things. And so I think it's not a new conversation, but the attitudes that we see towards diversity, equity, and inclusion have shifted. And now it's become a highly politicized term when in reality, it's just the way that we've always done things. Education has always believed in equity and inclusion and trying to create citizens in the world who believe in these things as well.
All we're trying to do is get the best student learning outcomes. Really? Like, don't we want all of us to be literate, thoughtful people? Well, when you have a student showing up on your campus and they are suffering the effects of race-based inequities. They have experienced systemic racism, and they're showing up in your space triggered or unable to learn. You want to dig into that and figure that out. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We want all of us to thrive. We want this grand experiment of American democracy to be successful. So that's all we're trying to do. This is not affirmative action here, people. We're not trying to lower the standards for certain groups. We're trying to get everybody at the best functioning level possible. And so in education, we understand that you need to meet people where they're at, right? And so standing in the space, even like defending the very concept of DEI, is a big part of what we talk about in the DEI mess. And we really dig into some of the misconceptions that people have about DEI work. And I really invite, and I've had on people who are, identify as Republican, who are conservative, bringing their concerns to the table and having a loving and honest conversation about it, because we are spoon-fed political vitriol from both sides that is just totally inaccurate. But then I also go toe-to-toe and I push back against people on the left who try to very narrowly define what the work is and who gets to be seen in it. If we had a more inclusive lens, and that's what's so ironic about DEI work, particularly in K12, is that it's so exclusive. But if we were more inclusive from the beginning, I think we would have been in a better position to defend DEI work once it was under attack. Like, if we had a message for low socioeconomic students, which is the lion's share of kids in America, if we had a narrative for them, we could have stood on less shaky ground as a DEI protective force, but we didn't. We set forth with highly exclusive, identity-based things that polarized America. And I'm not saying identity isn't important to protect and defend in DEI work, but there's a better way to do it that gets more people on board. And so that's what we talk about.
Well, and part of the problem with the way that this stuff is rolled out in school districts is it's not a nuanced approach. And things like equity, inclusion, discussions of diversity, they're highly nuanced conversations. And you've got to have trust of all stakeholders, and you have to be consistent and clear with the way that these things are rolled out.
Thank you for that. I want to switch gears to talking about the teacher health mess. And in this mess, these are some episodes I actually have not recorded yet. A lot of these I've got back episodes from the past 2 to 3 years. This one I don't. This one came to me as I was really reflecting on our mental health crisis in our profession, but also some of the really sad and tragic physical health outcomes we've been seeing in our population, anecdotally from the people we've known. This profession will chew you up and spit you out. And you don't have access to great health care, even though you pay an arm and a leg for it. And the vicarious trauma of holding all the trauma of the kids, it manifests physically. We are kind of a mess as teachers. What do you want to say about this topic?
I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I'd wager that, if they surveyed teachers, that things like anxiety and depression would be pretty high. I took a course a few years ago about what's called trauma stewardship, and it was all about self-care that often goes to the wayside because teachers take care of everyone else. And through taking care of them, we often experience peripheral trauma, right? Like if you have a kid that reports to you that they're abused, that takes a toll. And we often are told to suck it up and come to work. When we went back to work with the pandemic, after the pandemic, we were some of the first to be asked. I know people who work in the tech sector who are complaining just recently that, my boss told us we got to go back to work. I don't want to hear it, right? Because, teachers often forego their own health, their mental health, well-being, because we care about kids, and we're always going to do the right thing. And sometimes that's been used as leverage against us. And so, in my experience, just my personal experience, I could list a number of people in the past decade that I've known and loved who've retired, and then soon after, a year, maybe two, passed away for one reason or another. I've heard aneurysms, cancer is rampant, depression is rampant, and that's just one of my biggest fears as a teacher, because I keep seeing it time and time again.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm dreaming of retirement, I'm looking for that sunset, and then all of a sudden the other shoe drops, and it's just so sad every time it happens, and it happens a lot more than I think people know. We give our all to this job if we're doing it right, and that definitely takes a toll on us and the people around us, our families. And I'm lucky enough to have another teacher in the house. And during the pandemic, it was real weird teaching in different rooms and really getting an eye for what we did. But
Yeah.
I'm lucky. A lot of my friends, they don't have maybe teacher partners, and so they don't get to bounce off what happened today. And I do that a lot. Trina is my sounding board and my ballast at times, because if you don't have that, what's the alternative? So I think definitely, for you teachers out there, take care of yourselves. That's one thing I've learned after years of teaching, because I used to go in on Saturdays. I used to go to every school dance. I used to go to the Disneyland and all the trips and everything. And then you have a family and you have children, and that definitely changes your perspective. And my perspective now is take care of yourself. Don't work on weekends if you can really avoid it. Yeah, sometimes you got a stack of papers, but really take care of yourselves, because like we said, there's a shortage of you, and we need every good teacher that we can get.
Absolutely. I think this profession relies on martyrs and people who just pour their heart and soul into this work. And we really need to stop doing that. We really need to stop volunteering our heart, body, and soul, and really expose the fact that this profession is not tenable. We talk about that in a lot more detail in future episodes.